Hey guys, I'm going over the scariest stories from r/no sleep. Like and subscribe for more videos.
A man gave me his old family videos. After watching them, I understand why he was so desperate to get rid of them. My job is trash. I don't mean that in a metaphorical, I hate my career kind of way. I mean it literally. I'm a garbage collector. My alarm goes off at 4 a.m. I pull on steel-toed boots, and I spend the next 8 hours heaving the things people don't want anymore into the back of a growling truck. It's a dirty, smelly, physically demanding job, but it pays the bills for my tiny apartment, and it's honest work. You also learn a lot about people from what they throw away. Most of the time, it's just bags of household garbage. But sometimes you find treasures. A broken piece of furniture that can be fixed, a box of old books. People get rid of the strangest things. My rule is that if it's in a box and set out separately, it's fair game to take a look. That's how I ended up with the tapes. It happened a few weeks ago. I was on my usual route through a quiet, older suburban neighborhood. One of the residents, a man probably in his late 20s, flagged me down. He looked awful. His eyes were wide and bloodshot, with dark, bruised-looking circles under them, like he hadn't slept in a month. His hands were trembling.
Hey,
He said, his voice a hoarse whisper.
you're the garbage guy, right? Can you just take this for me? Just get it out of my house, please.
He shoved a heavy cardboard box into my hands. It was sealed with a single hasty strip of packing tape. Sure thing, man, I said. Just leave it on the curb next time.
No,
He said, his eyes darting around nervously.
I need it gone, now.
He didn't wait for a reply. He just turned and practically ran back into his house, slamming the door behind him. I shrugged, tossed the box into the cab of my truck to look through later, and continued my route. That night, back in my apartment, I finally opened the box. It was heavy. Inside, packed neatly, were at least 50 old home video cassettes, the kind we all used in the 90s. Big, clunky black rectangles. None of them had labels. They were completely anonymous. I'm not gonna lie. My first thought was a little voyeuristic. Who knew what could be on these? Maybe something weird, something interesting. It was a window into a stranger's life. Anything was better than the usual mind-numbing cable TV. I had an old VCR TV combo I'd picked up from a thrift store, so I pulled it out, blew the dust off it, and popped in the first tape. The screen flickered to life with a burst of static, then resolved into a shaky, oversaturated home video. It was a kid's birthday party, a backyard, a bunch of screaming children, a cake with cartoon characters on it. The timestamp in the corner said 1998. Watching it, I got a strange sense of secondhand nostalgia. The clothes, the music, the quality of the video itself, it was a time capsule. And I recognized one of the kids, a small, skinny boy with a goofy grin. It was the man who had given me the box. The next few tapes were more of the same. Christmas mornings with mountains of discarded wrapping paper, awkward family vacations to the beach, the camera panning shakily across sunburned faces. I watched him grow up on those tapes, from a little kid to a gawky teenager. It was strangely intimate, watching these moments that were never meant for my eyes. It was all so normal, boring even. I was about to give up and just toss the whole box. That's when I put in the tape of the barbecue. The timestamp said July 2002. The scene was familiar. A sunny backyard, adults drinking beer, kids running through a sprinkler. The man from the tapes, now a teenager, was trying to flip burgers on a grill, clearly failing. It was another slice of mundane life. I was half watching, half scrolling on my phone, and then the video glitched. The screen dissolved into a brief, violent snowstorm of static, a loud psst coming through the speakers. It lasted only a second. When the picture returned, the scene was the same. The burgers were still burning, the kids were still screaming, but something was different. In the background, hanging from the thick branches of a large oak tree, there was a shadow. It wasn't there before the glitch. I rewound the tape, watched it again. Normal scene. Bzzzt, glitch. And there it was. It was a dark, amorphous shape, like a smudge on the lens, but it had a distinct, unsettling form. It looked tentacled, like a squid or an octopus made of pure darkness, just dangling there among the leaves. I leaned closer to the screen, my heart beating a little faster. It was probably nothing, a film artifact. A bit of the tape degrading in a weird way. That had to be it. I shook my head, dismissing the creepy feeling crawling up my spine, and let the tape play out. The shadow never moved. It was just there, a silent, impossible observer in a happy family memory. I put in the next tape. A Christmas morning from 2004. The family was in their living room, opening presents. The teenage boy, the man, was showing off a new video game console. It was all laughter and joy. I was watching intently now, waiting. Psst. The glitch, the static, the picture returned, and my blood ran cold. It was there again, the thing, but it wasn't on a tree in the background anymore. It was in the house. For a few frames, just a fraction of a second, I saw it standing in the dark hallway that led out of the living room. It was clearer this time. It had depth, a three-dimensional quality. It wasn't a flat shadow. It was a thing. A tall, spindly, dark thing with what looked like long, thin limbs that coiled and shifted like they had no bones. It was just standing there, in the shadows of the hallway, watching the family celebrate. I rewound it, played it in slow motion. Before the glitch, the hallway was empty. After the glitch, the creature was there. It wasn't part of the original recording. The glitch wasn't revealing something that was already there. The glitch was adding it. It was inserting this observer into the memory. That's when the obsession began. I spent the next 3 days doing nothing but watching those tapes. I called in sick to work. I didn't eat. I barely slept. I sat in my darkened apartment, the only light coming from the glowing screen of the old TV, and I watched. Every single tape was the same. A normal family event, a wedding, a graduation, a trip to a theme park, and in every single one, the glitch would happen. And every single time, the thing would be there, and it was getting closer. On a tape of a trip to the zoo, it was a dark shape behind the glass of the reptile house. On a tape of a school play, it was a tall, thin figure standing in the wings of the stage. With each appearance, it became more defined. The vague, octopus-like shadow resolved into a distinct silhouette. The silhouette grew limbs, a torso, a head. It was impossibly tall and thin, its limbs too long, its joints bending at unnatural angles. It was like a spider, and a man had been melted together in the dark. It never moved. It never interacted with the family. It just watched, a silent, parasitic passenger on their memories. I felt like I was losing my mind. Was I just seeing things? Was the man who gave me the tapes some kind of weird indie filmmaker who made found footage horror? But it all felt too real. The family, their lives. It was authentic. The creature was the only thing that felt wrong. I got to the last tape in the box. It was older than the others, the quality much worse. The timestamp read 1995. The tape began in a sterile, white hospital room, a tired-looking woman in a hospital bed. A man, who I recognized as a younger version of the father from the other tapes, holding a small, swaddled bundle. It was the birth. The birth of the man who had given me the box, his first moments of life, captured on grainy magnetic tape. I braced myself. I stared at the screen, my knuckles white, waiting for the inevitable glitch, waiting to see where the creature would appear this time, in the corner of the room, in the reflection of a window. But the tape played on. The baby cried, the mother smiled, exhausted but happy. The father cooed. The camera zoomed in on the baby's tiny wrinkled face. It played perfectly, from start to finish. No glitches, no static, no creature. The tape ended, the screen dissolving into a blank blue void. A wave of immense shuddering relief washed over me. I laughed, a choked, hysterical sound. It was over. The last tape was clean. It was just a weird, recurring flaw in the other tapes. A magnetic anomaly. My brain had filled in the blanks, created a monster out of nothing. I was an idiot. A sleep-deprived, paranoid idiot. I leaned forward and turned off the VCR. The TV screen went black, and I saw it. It wasn't in a reflection. It wasn't a trick of the light. It was in the room with me. The darkness behind the television, in the corner where the shadows were deepest, was wrong. It was a patch of absolute black, a void that seemed to drink the faint light from the street lamp outside. And from that void, 2 points of light ignited. 2 giant, crimson, self-luminous eyes. They weren't looking at the TV. They were looking at me. I could see its shape now, fully formed, no longer a grainy image on a screen. It was pressed against the wall and the ceiling, its long, spindly limbs splayed out like a monstrous spider. Its body was a shifting mass of shadows. But those eyes were solid and real and filled with an ancient, terrifying intelligence. I don't think I screamed. I think the sound was trapped in my throat, a solid ball of pure terror. I scrambled backward, falling out of my chair, and crab walked across the floor until my back hit the opposite wall. I fumbled for the lamp on my end table, my fingers feeling like useless, clumsy sausages. I found the switch and flicked it. The room was flooded with light. The corner was empty. The TV was just a TV. The shadows were just shadows. It was gone, but it had been there. I knew it. I spent the rest of the night huddled in my lit kitchen, clutching a butcher knife, jumping at every creak and groan of the old building. Sleep was a country I could no longer visit. The next morning, driven by a desperate need for answers, I decided to go back to the man's house. I had to know. I had to ask him what he'd put me through. I gathered up the tapes, put them back in their box, and drove over to his neighborhood. When I pulled onto his street, I saw the police cars. Yellow tape was cordoning off his house. My heart sank into my stomach. I parked down the street and walked closer, trying to look like a curious neighbor. A small group of actual neighbors were gathered on the sidewalk, speaking in hushed, morbid tones.
Just found him this morning.
An elderly woman was saying.
Terrible, so young.
What happened?
Another neighbor asked. The woman lowered her voice, but I was close enough to hear.
They're not saying much, but my cousin's son is one of the officers on scene. He said it was the strangest thing he's ever seen. The man was just sitting in his chair, no signs of a struggle, but his head, well, the top of his skull was gone, and his brain, it was missing.
I didn't hear anything else. The words hit me like a physical blow. His brain was missing, the world tilted on its axis. I turned and stumbled back to my car, the box of tapes feeling like it weighed 1,000 pounds. I got home, my mind a blank roar of static. I needed to get rid of them, burn them, throw them in a river. I brought the box inside, and as I was about to just dump the contents into a trash bag, my fingers brushed against a piece of paper at the very bottom, hidden beneath the last cassette. I hadn't noticed it before. It was a small, folded note. The handwriting was shaky, erratic, the writing of a man on the edge of utter collapse. I unfolded it. It only had a few words.
I am sorry. It promised me it would leave me alone.
And in that moment, I understood everything. He passed it to me, and now I don't know what to do. Do I live with this thing, this silent observer, waiting for it to get hungry? Or do I find another person, another stranger, and hand them a box of old tapes? Do I save myself by damning someone else just like he did? But it hadn't saved him. The creature had lied. It had moved on to me, and then it had gone back to collect its final payment from him. His brain. Maybe that's what it eats. Minds. I don't know. All I know is that I'm so tired, but I'm terrified to go to sleep.
I'm a famous author. I've never written a word of my books. You've seen my books. No, I'm not going to tell you which books nor who I am, so don't ask. I assure you, though, if you're a big reader or even a sort of reader, then you've probably read, or at least heard of, some of my stuff. My stuff in the hypothetical sense of the phrase. As the title says, I was never actually the one who wrote my books. Again, don't ask me who really did, not because of privacy or theft laws or anything. I just don't know. I used to be a plumber, of all things. Not the most glamorous of professions, but it paid pretty well, seeing how almost nobody wanted to do it. My dad trained me right out of high school, and pretty soon I'd saved enough to move to my own apartment. A few years later, I decided I may as well sell my soul and get locked into a mortgage, because at least then the rent money wouldn't be going to waste. The idea was to get a few roommates and have them pay for my house instead, but I'm a private person. It's not that I liked living alone per se, but I never had many friends growing up. I didn't know who to invite to the other rooms, and the idea of strangers moving in with me, I read. That's what you do when you're 26 and you don't have friends. You read books and pretend you do have friends. And when you finish one book and realize you're still alone, you pick up the next one. It's a bit like alcohol. You have to drink another glass in the morning to recover from the damage of the glass from the night before. Except, nobody ever applauds you for getting drunk as a hobby the way they do for reading. If that all sounds like a terribly depressed way to view life, well, it's probably because I was. However, you want to say it, I was in what you might call a drought period, one of those times when you read something exceptional the month before, and now you can't find anything that compares to it. I tried a few series, but nothing piqued my interest, and I'd all but given up, resorted to watching Friends for the 30th time instead. That's when I found The Basement. Basement is a strong word. Crawl space is more accurate. I was pulling up the carpeting in one of the guest rooms during some renovations, and there it was. This flat door with a brass handle on the closet floor. Like any new homeowner, I opened it and hopped down. Rot and mildew and something metallic, all bundled into one scent. Maybe a cat had died here. It was 4, possibly 4.5 feet tall. I had to stoop all the way over to shuffle forwards. The passage ended a little after that, so I grabbed the papers, climbed out, and closed the trap door. It wasn't until that night, when I'd finished tearing out the carpet, and the emptiness of the house was getting to me, that I actually stopped to read the papers. The story on them. I was enthralled. I didn't move until I'd finished them, but each word, each sentence gripped me and dragged me in. It was real. That's what it felt like. The story on the paper was reality, and my life was the fake thing made of ink. If only I could keep reading, I could keep living, and I turned the last page. The story stopped mid-sentence. I flipped through the pages over and over, hoping somehow I'd missed a page, that there was more. I reread the entire thing, then again. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning I called in sick. I paced the house. I tried watching TV. I tried reading, but nothing worked. I was obsessed. I had to finish the story, but the ending didn't even exist. After 2 days of this, I'd had enough. I'll bury it, I thought. I'll bury it, and my mind will accept it's over. Instead of digging a hole, though, I went back to the crawl space. I would leave it where I found it, and try to forget the story. When I went back down, a fresh stack of pages awaited me. That's how it started. New pages wouldn't appear until the old ones were read. But that was no problem. I read them with a savage hunger, chapter after chapter. I called in sick to work again. But when my dad tried to come visit, I told him not to, that he'd only get sick. I read for hours and hours, taking trips back down to the crawl space where new pages would await me each time, until finally, it was finished. The end. I popped down one more time, just to see if there was some sort of an epilogue, but the crawl space was empty. The story was over. For weeks, I searched online for clues about who had written the story. Nothing came up. I reached out to the past owner of the house.
"There's a crawl space?"
He asked me.
"I never knew."
I sat on the book for weeks and weeks, obsessed but resolved to give it up, to put it past me. Eventually, I reached out to some literary agents. One more sip of alcohol to cure the hangover. From what I hear, it takes months and months of waiting to hear back after you reach out to agents. The ones I reached out to took days. Each of them requested to read the whole book, and each of them offered me contracts within the week.
"You're the best writer I've ever signed,"
said the agent I went with. I didn't correct her. Publishing went much the same. It should have taken months. Within weeks, I had signed with a major publishing house. The editing process that should have taken months took days.
"I can't imagine changing a word of this,"
my editor told me.
"You're an amazing writer."
I said nothing. Most authors face mediocre success at best. The ones you hear about, those are the exceptions. For every career author, there's 100 authors that never make back their advance. That should have been my expectation. But even then, I knew something was different about this book. Not just the way I'd found it, but the things it did to me, to others. It was enthralling in the way a blind kitten crawling towards a cliff is enthralling. Once you glance at it, you can't look away. Sure enough, it was a bestseller. It won awards. I earned back my advance in weeks. They invited me to talk shows and conventions, but I declined them all. Don't get used to this, I told myself. It was one book. It wasn't even yours. The inflow of money was great. Fantastic, really. But I didn't quit my regular job. It wasn't like I'd be writing another book, and eventually everybody would calm down. They'd forget about my book, and I'd be forgotten. The friends would stop calling. Things would go back to normal. And then one night when I couldn't sleep after I'd spent hours staring up at the ceiling of my lonely bedroom, I went back down. Some deep slumbering part of me had already known they'd be there. The new pages. That was how it had worked the first time, after all. I had to read the pages for new ones to appear. It made sense. I would have to publish the last book for a new one to appear. I read the new chapters. I visited the crawl space 10 more times that night until I'd finished the whole thing. The next day, I quit my job. And so began my new life. I timed it purposefully. Every 6 to 8 months, I would submit my new manuscript. Every 6 months, I would take a trip back down to the cellar. Each book release shot me back up to the top of the bestseller list. Money rolled in steadily, more than I knew what to do with. It wasn't like I was going to buy a new house. No, that much was obvious. I would live where I did until I died because I needed to. For my career, I told myself, I have to stay here for my career. Even then, though, I think I knew. I wasn't staying there to support my lifestyle. It was a nice perk. Being rich certainly had its benefits, but it was about the books. It was always about the books. I reread them constantly. What else was there to do? The hours most writers take to write was free time for me. Might as well read, reread, consume. At first, I would see how long I could go without picking one of my books. 1 day, 2, 3. That was the limit, I discovered. By day 3, my palms would get sweaty, and my stomach would start cramping. Eventually, I stopped resisting. Reading was all I did with my time. I quit all other books. I did try to read them, but none of them satisfied me. They were flat, like the 2D version of the 3D stories the crawlspace gave me. They were the lotus flowers from the Greek myths. Once you try one, regular food could never taste the same. At least it's just me, I told myself, my one small comfort. I could fade away, give in, and that was all right. Nobody else would be harmed. Besides my dad, nobody cared about me. I wasn't hurting anybody. I convinced myself that was the truth. I really believed the books were just affecting me until my first book signing. I'm not entirely sure what convinced me to do it. Maybe it was my agent or publisher who'd both pestered me to do one for years. Partially, it was due to one of the rare recovery periods where I was actively trying to stop reading, always to little success. But I did one, my very first book signing. The bookstore filled up. Literally, they were turning people away. Hundreds showed up to meet me, the false author of these best-selling books. They were so excited to meet me. I saw the anticipation as I did a reading. I was almost looking forward to the book signing, despite the hours-long line.
Yours are my favorite books.
One woman told me.
These are what got me into reading,
Said another.
They're the only thing I read now.
Glad to hear it, I said, chuckling as I signed. I looked up. The man wasn't smiling.
I'm not.
He said. He walked away. I started noticing it then. The jittery look in the eyes. The way people desperately clutch their copies of my books. Not in a loving way. Not like a child clinging to a teddy bear. More like victims of the Titanic hanging from the rails as it tipped. What else do you read? I asked a teenager and her father. The teenager shook her head.
Nothing. Why would I?
To another fan holding a battered copy, I asked, How many times have you read it? She laughed nervously.
I don't know. I can't remember.
She burst into tears.
I can't stop. Why can't I stop?
Almost nobody reacted as she tore out of the bookstore, sobbing. It was in all of them, that frantic obsession in me. Their simultaneous loathing and love for the books. Some of them outright scowled at me, like they hadn't wanted to come, but hadn't been able to resist. It was the very last woman in line who scared me the most. She didn't even look up at me. She stared down at the book in her hands, the very first one I'd ever published. She never responded to my questions. She never put it down. I recognized the cover. It was the first edition of my first book, which meant she'd been one of the earliest people ever to pick me up. Her eyes were bloodshot. Her teeth were falling out like she couldn't spare the time to brush them, and her skin was a sickly yellow. I never did another book signing. It gets worse as time goes on. That's what I've realized. The longer you read them, the more dependent you are on them. I've tried to stop publishing. Of course I have. 12 times. Look at what my books are doing to people. Look at what they'll continue to do. Even if I could stop, though, it wouldn't matter. Once you've tasted the lotus petal, you can never go back. No one I've talked to has been able to quit once they've read something from the crawl space. All those people at the book signing, all my thousands and thousands of readers. It's too late for them, the way it's too late for me. My hair falls off in clumps now. My skin is yellow, and my teeth, nearly all of them are gone. Even so, I continue. Year after year, climbing down through that trap door, sending off my manuscripts to the publisher. I can't stop. I don't want to anymore. It's easier to just give in. Sip by sip by sip. It's almost a relief to grab the pages the crawl space gives me and pump them out into the world. That's the only way I get more of them. And it's not like I can write my own stories. This entire time I've never written a word myself. Not one. Not even these ones.
My father was completely terrified when he met my boyfriend. I was really anxious for Alan to meet my parents. He was my first boyfriend after a long time. We met at the store where I worked, where he came in looking for running shoes, and left with my number. We had been together for just over 2 months, and he was already insisting on meeting my parents. When he finally arrived at our house, my mom greeted him at the door with her usual warmth and gave him a big hug. He thanked her and came in shyly. He was tall, a few years older than me, and had a lot of tattoos. I greeted him with a kiss on the cheek and led him to the dining room, where my dad was already sitting, drinking a beer and messing with something on his phone. But when he looked up and saw Alan, his eyes widened and his mouth dropped slightly. Alan stepped forward and raised his hand to greet him, and my dad just stared at it for a few seconds before slowly lifting his own, like he wasn't sure. I was pretty upset by that reaction. I expected some resistance. He was a protective dad and a retired police officer, but Alan's look clearly made him uncomfortable, and he didn't hide it. I thought that was rude. My mom noticed the awkward silence and quickly stepped in. She told Alan to sit across from my dad at our small 4-person table and told us to go ahead and serve ourselves. During dinner, my mom asked Alan about his family. He said they were immigrants and that he grew up in San Antonio before moving here. My mom let out a surprised sigh and said she loved San Antonio. We had lived there before my father got transferred. From that point on, the conversation got livelier. Between compliments about the food, Alan started to relax and talked with my mom about his life in San Antonio and his job at a car dealership. But while the three of us kept chatting, my dad stayed quiet, poking at his food like he had no appetite. He didn't say a word. Every time my mom nudged him to join in, he'd turn to her looking pale, like he'd seen a ghost, then go back to staring at his plate. When we finished eating, my mom mentioned she had made a special dessert to welcome Alan, her famous cheesecake, the one I'd spent the whole afternoon running around town to get the exact ingredients for. She excused herself and headed to the kitchen, and I told Alan I'd go help her. I figured leaving the two of them alone might help. Someone had to break the ice. When I got to the kitchen, my mom went straight to check the fridge, and I took the chance to ask her why my dad was acting so weird that day. She said she wasn't sure either, but it might have something to do with some bad news he got that morning. Something about 2 former coworkers from the PD I vaguely remembered. What happened? I asked.
2 of them died last month. Tragic stuff,
she said, dividing her focus between explaining and testing the texture of the cheesecake.
One died in a car crash on the highway with his whole family. The other died in a house fire.
I felt bad for them, and I wondered if his behavior was just him grieving old buddies. Still, that didn't explain taking it out on Alan. My mom said the dessert was almost ready, she just needed to finish the topping, and asked me to check with my dad where he'd put the offset spatula. I grabbed the dessert plates and forks on the way and walked back to the living room, hoping they'd maybe broken the ice with some football talk or whatever. But as soon as I stepped in, I froze. My dad was crying. Not just tearing up, crying hard, like I'd never seen before. Alan was still in the same seat, staring at him with a cold, piercing look. I walked over, confused, set the plates down, and asked what was going on. Neither of them looked at me. My dad paused his crying for a second and spoke to Alan.
"This is not fair. I was only doing my job,"
he said, his voice shaking.
"I didn't know anything when I arrested you."
"When you framed me."
Alan cut in, his voice sharp and unfamiliar to me.
"And I got 15 years for it."
"Was just following orders,"
my dad replied, almost begging. Alan grinned like he'd been waiting for that line.
"Every one of them. Every single one told me you gave the orders. It didn't take long after I played with them."
Before Alan could finish, my dad leaned forward, shot me a side glance, and spoke with panic in his eyes.
"At least leave my family out of this. They didn't do anything."
"Did you know my mother offed herself?"
Alan said, his voice low and deadly calm.
"She couldn't bear to think I'd done the things you accused me of. So I'll have to think about it,"
he continued, flashing a disturbing smile. Then, for the first time since I'd walked in, he looked straight at me, His eyes were wild, like a beast caged and about to break loose. I was ready to scream or run or anything, but my dad suddenly grabbed my arm hard.
The spatula is in the second drawer of the pantry.
Dad, this isn't the...
The second drawer. Go get it for your mother, now.
My heart was pounding. Why was he saying that now? But then, like a lightning strike, I remembered. That was where he kept his extra Glock, like the paranoid retired cop he was. I didn't say anything. I turned and walked slowly down the hallway under Alan's terrifying gaze. As soon as I was out of his sight, I ran to the pantry, past my mom's confused face. The Glock was exactly where I remembered. I loaded it, turned around, and sprinted back to the dining room, ready to aim and shoot if I had to. But when I got there, only one person was still at the table. Alan was gone. No sign of him. My dad sat still, head hanging low like he'd fallen asleep. But as I stepped closer, I saw he wasn't breathing. Buried deep into his neck was a dessert fork, almost halfway in.
Thank you so much for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe for more.